this.
The latest CBS News poll shows partisan division over President Trump's summit with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. 68% of Republicans approve of the meeting, while 83% of Democrats disapprove of it. Here to break down these numbers and more is CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, great to see you here. Really interesting numbers. Clearly, there's a partisan divide here, but what do you think is the most interesting coming out of this? Did this summit with Putin hurt Trump among his base?
Well, you look at that overall approval among Americans, and it's 32%. So across the board, this wasn't something that most Americans thought went well. But among Republicans, you had 68% approval for how things went. Now, at first glance, that's high. It is high. It's most. It's 2/3 or more. But then if you compare that to other specific things that we've mentioned the president doing things on, so the economy, overall job approval throughout the summer, it's lower than that among Republicans. So compared to how Republicans typically rate him, it's a little bit lower when you put it in context, despite the fact that it's high.
So what effect does this meeting have on people's confidence in President Trump?
Well, Republicans say it's unchanged.
Okay.
So when we ask people, does this make you more or less confident or not change about the president's ability or willingness to stand up for U.S. interests? Here we see more partisan splits. Surprise, surprise, perhaps. But Democrats say that it lessened things, and then other folks are more mixed. So it doesn't seem like overall it helped it, but Republicans say that they're at least holding firm.
Something I find so interesting is that, for so long, one of the bedrock policies of Republicans has been to be tough on Russia. I'm curious whether your polling shows since President Trump took office, there is a bit of a softening towards Russia on the right.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have seen, when we track the trend of is Russia a friend, an ally, an enemy of the United States, a few years ago in 2015, Republicans were more inclined to say that it was not a friend or an ally. And then once President Trump was elected, there was a shift that we saw in the polling where relatively more Republicans started to say that it was a friend, if not an ally, in fact, not an ally. And then that number has held steady even now. So you have seen that, but I should note you've seen it go the other way a little bit among Democrats. Big reason for this, in part, is that, look, geopolitics is complicated stuff. Even people who follow it every day have a lot that they have to absorb. So for most folks, when things like this don't hit their kitchen table or have a day-to-day effect on them, what do? They follow their parties and they follow their favorite leader. So we often expect to some degree, whatever the proposed policies are of the person in power, in this case the president with his base, that some in his base would naturally take their cues from him. It's part of rational decision-making, some argue, but on the other hand, you do see that movement, towards Russia.
Absolutely. Now, we do know that the issue of whether or not Russia meddled in the election, which we know is as a fact, according to our intelligence agencies, and something that President Trump shed a little question on during the Helsinki summit, is something that kind of cost him. I want to play some sound from Homeland Security Secretary Kristen Nielsen. She had this to say.
I don't think there's any question in the intel community or at DHS that Russians attempted to infiltrate and interfere with our electoral system. They have the capability, they have the intent. What we're doing at DHS is to work with states to prepare on that election infrastructure piece. That's the piece we have lead on, but I don't think there's any doubt that they did it. And I think we should all be prepared, given that capability and will, that they'll do it again.
So are Republicans in general questioning some of the intelligence community's information, or is that just the president?
More so, Republicans are more so than independents and Democrats are, yes, and more so than Americans overall. So 70% of Americans said that they believe those assessments from U.S. intelligence. But among partisan groups, Republicans were the relatively least likely to say that they believe it at 51%. So split on that. And Democrats say the most likely to say that they believe it. You know, we've seen part of this, too, to to put it in context, in other areas where the president's base and Republicans have been asked who they trust, who they believe across a wide range of issues, and very often, as compared to whether it's intelligence agencies or other institutions in government, or the mainstream media for that matter, Republicans say that they would prefer to get their information from and trust the president himself. So this is part of a sort of an ongoing trend that we've been seeing.
Anything else interesting you want to shed some light on in your polling?
Well, you know, I think there's a little bit of a difference in how people see the European Union. Widespread view that they are, the countries of the European Union are allies, and you know, as we start to talk about trade and tariffs and whether other countries are friendly or not, what we're seeing is that most Americans at least consider the countries of Europe to be friends or allies.
All right, well there you go. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for coming to see us.